Well, I am delighted today to welcome Dr. Regina Lark, author of Emotional Labor, Why a Woman's Work is Never Done and What to Do About It, who is on a mission to help women clear clutter and chaos from their lives. Now, I, as a woman, say, yes, please. I've had one of those days full of clutter and chaos today. But before we go there, Regina, can you please introduce yourself, who you are, maybe where you are located, what you do, and especially why you do it?
Sure. Julie, thank you so much for letting me join you this morning. It is 7 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, and I am in Long Beach, California, which is a city within Los Angeles County. And I could talk forever about me. What would you like to hear?
Just a little bit. While reading your bio, you have a past in corporate. So I'm wondering, how did you end up doing what you do? And also the book, I loved the title. How did you get around thinking of doing that?
Okay, how much time do you have? Kidding.
Give us
All right.
5 minutes.
So I was a non-traditional student. Here in the US, traditionally, a student will leave high school and transfer to a 4-year college or to a 2-year community college.
Right.
And so I left high school and I transferred to the community college. But when I transferred, I was a full-blown alcoholic by that time. By the time I was 18, I ate a lot of drugs and I drank a lot of alcohol. My first 7 years as a 2-year community college student spent in drunk and alcoholic stupor. And then I got sober when I was 23 and worked full time, took one class a night. And by the time I was 30, I had completed my undergraduate degree.
Well done.
From there, I learned about master's degrees and PhDs. I don't come from a family that really ever encouraged me to go to school. So I said to my partner at the time, they have these degrees. And he said, what's the best one? And I said, I think the PhD. So I just went with that. So I call myself an accidental PhD. I had supported myself as a nurse's aide, as a medical assistant. And by the time I got into my undergrad at the 4-year university, I was hired to be a clerical assistant. And one of the good things about that was I was working full time on the campus where I was going to school.
Oh, fantastic.
So I only had to park my car once. I would take every 7 a.m. class. That's why I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for you at 7 a.m. because I have a long history of being in the classroom at 7 a.m. My professional working life was in the universities.
Yes.
So corporate in the university setting is a lot different than corporate outside the university setting. From what I understand, I've never worked in, office towers.
Yes.
So I loved campus life. And so I worked full time, went to school full time because I'm just wired this way.
You're a very determined woman.
And I finished my PhD by the time I was 41. While I was in graduate school, I had read about the lives of Japanese women who marry American soldiers. And I embarked on a study and became an expert in the immigration of Japanese war brides to the United States. So what that did for me was give me a real strong sensitivity to older adults, because the women I interviewed for my study were in their 70s and 80s.
Okay.
So I am now graduated. I'm teaching all over Southern California. And then I was hired at a major research institution to run a PhD in women's studies program and to work at a center for feminist research. And all of that informed my understanding of what it means to be female, how the lives of women took shape. Right. And I'm speaking very broadly. I mean, it's don't just learn that. But so my last job, which will always be my last job, the summer of 2008, I left for vacation and I was in Jerusalem and I was at a friend's house. And while I was there, I said, Nadra, I don't want to be a tourist today. How about if I do your kitchen? And she's like, Habibti, what does that mean? I said, Nada. Your girls are in their 30s. You got sippy cups in the cupboard. Just let me do what I do. Because in my family of origin, there are 6 of us.
Right.
4 of us are very organized and neat and tidy. 2 of us need us.
Right.
So doing the work of decluttering and organizing is just very easy and natural to me. So I did her kitchen, good result. I get back to my desk at my last job, and I learned 1 week later that my unit was being dismantled, my position was eliminated, and this was 3 months before I was turning 50.
Right. Gosh, scary times then.
Well, honest, I'm not a scared person.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought was, I'm about to turn 50. I have the highest degree in the land. I'm in the land of opportunity. I really went there pretty quickly, but I didn't know there were no jobs available. So
Yes.
I told my roommate 2 months into my layoff, I'm going to organize until something better comes along. We looked up organizers in our zip code. The first person to come up is Catherine. She's got a PhD in electrical engineering. And I thought, wow, organizers are people. Okay. So we called Catherine. She invited us for dinner. I told Ronnie, my roommate, if I'm going to have a business, it's got to start with the letter A, because someday we'll be going back to the yellow pages and we're going to start with A. And I looked down an alley and I said, A clear path. She says, good idea. We met Catherine. She told me everything that she knew at that point about the world of professional organizing.
Right.
Decluttering and organizing. She hired me on a couple of jobs. I thought, wow, people pay you to declutter their kitchen? And I was off and running. And that was 15 years ago.
Gosh, yeah.
So
They
today,
really...
September 1st, and my company is 15 years old today.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, but you've taken something that, you know, we all know what clutter is, and we all see that some people find it easy to keep control of that. Some people are extremely miserable, frustrated. I mean, it's not just even the physical clutter, is it? It's what it makes you feel like, you know, whether you're in charge or not, whether you're capable or not. So, I mean, so you basically made a whole profession of this, and you've actually gone on to write a book, right? About, I love the word emotional labor. So what do you call emotional labor?
Telling you this next part is important to the journey. The folks who call me mostly for help are professional women between the ages of 40 and 75.
Okay.
Because A, they're viewed culturally, societally as the stakeholders in household management. They're doing all the work of household management. Culturally, the work of household management is viewed as quote unquote women's work.
True.
So picture this, Julie.
And it's even not viewed as work, right? It's sort of viewed as some sort of thing which happens in the background.
Well, Julie, we hear labor of love and we hear love, but we don't hear the labor part.
Yes.
So I'm sitting with these awesome, successful, smart women, and they're telling me their feelings of shame and despair and frustration and anxiety about the cluster in their house. Yes. And I'm learning and learning and learning about that they're the only ones doing it, that there's an assumption that this is a skill set that they have. Because I know that people are paying me to do work that heretofore had been seen as easy, but they weren't able to do it. So it wasn't easy for them, but they didn't know why it wasn't easy for them. So then I enroll in a lot of coursework and study to learn more about the brain, to understand why it's not easy for them. Right. And what I learned is that in order to keep things on task, on time, and tidy, one needs to have a huge staff, or they need to have access to the executive function part of their brain, which is what got you and I on time to this call. Right. It's our ability to manage our relationship with time, with emotions, with planning, processing, sequencing. So now I'm working with these amazing women. They're not good at the work. It's not their skill set. they're brilliant entrepreneurs, but they don't want to hang up their freaking clothes, but they're culturally prescribed for this, and they're living in families and they've got spouses, and the whole thing is on their shoulders.
Right, and then there's the stigma of culture as well, of not so much culture, but upbringing, right, in our societies. Well, I think in actually probably
All of
most
them.
societies, right?
Say the term men's work,
Yeah,
nobody
no.
vacuuming.
Yeah. And so also because before we didn't have professional careers as well, before it was then the role of the woman to run a household. That was her sort of job, was to make sure that everything was wonderful, and husband darling would come home in the evening and put his feet up and he'd earn the money and we'd done all the rest. But nowadays, of course, the rest has come as well. We also have careers. We also are, have been to school and are educated, and it's also seen as normal that we have a life outside the kitchen or the home.
Right. And through the various feminist movements, men, by and large, and I know there's some great guys out there doing equal or more in the household. I don't know if it's statistically relevant yet.
Yes.
What I learned through this process is, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of historical justifications for why women. We don't have time for that, but
no, and we have evolved since then, right?
I don't know if women are still carrying the bulk of the labor at home. I don't know how much we've evolved.
It's true.
We've created access, but we didn't create equity.
Very true. Very true.
So I'm learning about the brain. I'm seeing these amazing women, and I'm getting that a lot of the work that they do is invisible. And so when I'm starting to look at all this, so I've got my women's history hat on, I've got my hat as a professional organizer, I'm wearing my hat as someone that's learning about the executive function part of the brain, and I'm recognizing that a lot of the labor in the home is invisible. And the invisible part of the labor, many journalists and others started writing about it in terms of emotional labor. And emotional labor is being defined as the unseen, the unacknowledged, the undervalued, the invisible, the unpaid work that is usually done by one person in the home, regardless of skill set.
Yes.
Regardless. It's as if you have a vagina, you should know how to do this.
Yes.
And I don't know how to understand it other than if you have a particular body part, because after childbirth and breastfeeding, the whole notion of homemaking is up for grabs. Aside from childbirth and homemaking, where women are absolutely necessarily needed.
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. And I guess originally it was the idea of, okay, the man is out earning money. And what you said about money is it's unpaid. And I think from that point of view, our society is so based on the value of money that the idea is, okay, somebody's got to pay the bills, right? So traditionally it was the man who would go out and buy for all these reasons, before women were not to be seen out, and, they were had to be protected, and maybe would have neurosis or whatsoever if we went to work, all those things that we've evolved from. But as you say, it's doubled. We haven't at any point in society said, well, in order for women to do that, this unseen labor, which isn't paid. So as you say, it's not even considered labor. It's like, I don't know if you've ever had any voluntary jobs, but I had a very high-flying voluntary job in Africa, and I was president of 250 women and making a lot of money through, caritative work and organizing events and all of that. But I remember very well my darling husband back then. One morning, I'd been struggling the whole week with my budget and how to bring it to the board and all of this, and he sort of said something like, enjoy your coffee morning, as if I was just sitting there having a Tupperware party or something. And I was aghast. I was thinking, what I was doing was, it was very important to me. And I was certainly not considered in my environment as, just sitting there having a fun coffee morning. We're talking about big money. We're talking about lots of people putting a lot of heart and purpose into what they were doing, making changes for the lives of the women and the children in the African country we were in. But that's how the person, the closest to me, who saw he viewed it, and that was such a shock for me. I never totally recovered from that.
Julie, as I've really looked into this work, the perception of the work,
Mm,
no matter what is taking place in the household,
yeah,
whether you're sitting at your desk, drinking coffee, looking at spreadsheets,
yeah,
trying to manage whatever is happening at home is viewed as easy.
yeah, yeah.
And statistically, we've seen over decades, every now and again, a statistic will come out that says if a full-time homemaker walked off the job today, what would it cost to replace that person?
Yes.
And with overtime, it's between $150,000 and $180,000 a year. I think the shame of it all is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of progress made on unpacking the value of what's really going on at home.
Yeah.
And making and finding ways to make the invisible visible so that it becomes more obvious what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
I tell people the work I'm doing on emotional labor is resonating with a lot of heterosexual married women, and who are often very surprised that gay men know how to do a complete cycle of laundry.
Exactly. Yeah.
To the point.
But so, okay, we're talking about various things here. We're talking about what you were talking about at the beginning, the brain set, the assumption that we're, because we're women, first of all, that we should be doing it, but also secondly, that we know how, right? That we know
Right.
better because, as you say, we have a vagina. So somehow that means that we know how to
It's
avoid
not only
clutter.
it's not only the vagina, but the work is seen as easy.
Yes, exactly.
And what's hard about opening a can of soup and putting it in the pot? What's hard about picking up the phone and making a dental appointment for a 10-year-old?
Yeah. But you don't do it for a week, and then you talk about chaos and anarchy and disaster, right? I mean, then the entire world collapses. Then it's a big time problem. Maybe that should be one of our tips. Don't do it for a week and see what happens. So you've written this book, and I'm certainly going to get it because I think it's really interesting, and I love these various angles. But so what you do is you help people also literally clear chaos and clutter, right?
Correct.
So what tips should we share? Is it more about making it visible or about how to go about this?
It's wow, there's so many ways.
We'll have to have you back. Let's choose one for today, but I would certainly would love to have you back.
I can tell your listeners, start paying big attention to whatever you're bringing through your front door.
Okay.
Nothing comes through my front door unless it feeds me aesthetically, intellectually, or it's like shampoo and milk, right? I don't need it to live with me if it's not going to serve me directly.
Okay.
So
the easiest way to not clutter is to basically not bring it in first.
Yes, but we are working with people with a lot of clutter. And it's falling on the shoulders of one person. In order to start really understanding how to create a more equitable division of labor, you've got to start with a kind and gentle and loving conversation. And from what I've seen, kind and loving and gentle conversations happened 5 years ago. Now many families are at the point with, F it, I'll do it myself.
Yes.
So we want to have an objectivity about the work.
Yeah.
We need to stop blaming, judging, resenting. Yes. So there's not a tip to give. We've got to get a shift. We've got to understand, we want to accept that we need to disrupt the narrative.
Yes. Or to even open up or even have a narrative, right?
Cultures. Yes, yes. It's so much bigger than we are. So how do we deal with this in our own personal households? So we start with, who are we going to bring in to help us have these conversations?
Right.
Another piece to that doesn't include name calling and blaming. As I've told couples, get the book and read it in bed together.
Hmm?
Honey, chapter 5 is tonight. Get the book and read it in bed together. And then also go into separate rooms and each write down everything that you believe you do for the management of the household. No label, judging, resenting, just write it down. So if you're the person that dusts the top of the fan blades, write it down. And then compare lists.
Yeah.
Again, without label, judge, or resenting.
And that's the hard one, isn't it? Because often I find women maybe at the beginning sort of are excited, let's say, you've got your first boyfriend live-in or whatever, and you're doing your thing, you think that's what you should be doing. And then little by little, you realize you also want a life and etc. And then it sort of evolves and you get to the point where you're a bit like, well, how can I have the conversation now? This has been going on for 20 years. And then we don't say anything, but just lash out doing that once. When we came back to Europe, because it was perfectly fine when we lived in Africa all those years, because the stuff was there. So neither of us were compromising what we were doing. But when we came back to Europe, I remember one day literally exploding and saying, remind me, when did we have the discussion that your career would mean you were off doing all these exciting things, etc., and that I'd be stuck at home trying to work out, how to cook and clean, etc., for a family of 5. And he was like really taken aback. But I realized it was up to me to have that conversation, but to have it, as you say, curiosity.
It was also up to him to recognize it.
Maybe.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If somebody is able to run a company, hire people, there's an understanding of what company management is all about. And if you turn around at home and how is it that you don't recognize the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week workload? So I don't actually ever blame women for anything. One woman, she said, my husband took over the laundry, but 2 weeks later I got it back because he said I'm better at it.
Yeah.
And I said, did you stick them in front of YouTube? It's again, these dynamics are interesting and irritating and long held. One woman said in my focus group for the book, she said, we talked about everything when we got together. And we felt like we were really a good couple because we were really parsing these things out. She said, but the conversation stopped too soon.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is really what you've described. Africa, in your family, you felt that there was so much going on and you were doing the important work of volunteering. You may not have recognized it. You felt that there was nothing to complain about. Let's put it that way. When you came back to Europe, your eyes opened a bit wider and you're thinking, oh my gosh. So what happened as I'm working on this book is that I came up with what I call the emotional labor life cycle. And the emotional labor life cycle is looking ahead to start anticipating everything that's going to be coming up.
Yeah.
I just made this connection that I hadn't thought of before. So going back to the executive functions, one of the big pieces of executive function is managing your relationship with time. So it's managing our relationship with the fixed clock.
Yes.
There's nothing we could do about managing that, but we manage our relationships. Okay, so stay with me. A lot of families who call me because of clutter, the person in charge of dealing with that more than likely has executive function challenges. And if that person doesn't have a good time horizon to be able to look into the future to anticipate everything that's coming up, what they have is, I've got to sign school permission slips right now.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're not looking ahead. Who's going to teach Sylvia to drive?
Yeah.
So the emotional labor life cycle encourages people to look ahead, look ahead, look ahead. Back up. Another component of the work that I'm doing here is to ask families to embrace what we call the art and practice of radical delegation. So delegating as we know it. So you're a business owner and you hire people to do a task that they're best suited to do.
Right.
You wouldn't hire somebody to cook that didn't know how to cook.
Yeah.
So here we have an understanding that the tasks of the home are automatically being divided toward the person best suited to the task, real or imagined.
Mm-hmm.
Radical delegation is delegating to get the work done regardless of who's best at it. So in Regina's perfect world, this is what happens. The adults in the household, they get together once a month and they open the emotional labor book and they look for the emotional labor life cycle. And they go, honey, look what we have coming up in the next year or two that we may want to start thinking about it. Let us preemptively, radically delegate.
Yes.
Let's look ahead and sit here tonight because we love each other so much and we want the uplift and elevation of our family and our home. Let's get this. And we're going to preemptively, radically delegate so that when that thing is upon us, we're not in chaos mode. We're not panicking.
Just like you would do with a car. I say, right, there's two of us in this, we're both shareholders of this company. And how can we do it? Because I'm hearing you say so many things. We're actually already at 30 minutes. But I mean, I'm hearing you say lots of things. One is the fact that indeed that because it's at home, it's considered easy.
We need to start from where we are.
Yeah.
And they're both coming home. She's living the triple day.
Yes, exactly. And then there's the second thing, which also triggered me, is the idea that maybe we also need to rethink how we judge when other people do it. I mean, lots of women, especially when, the estrogen is pounding and we just had the children, we've got eyes in the back of our head, we're able to juggle 8 million things at the same time and remember the hockey balls and the this and the that, mostly. But when we are a bit like, well, you know what, actually, I'd like to do something else with my time right now. I'd like to go for a jog. So will you please take care of this? And you come home and it's an absolute disaster. And then you get to the point where you say, I don't ask because it takes so much longer and it's never done as well as when I do it. So I also realized in my couple that I took over a lot of the tasks and moaned and complained about it, but I left no room for it to be done differently than how I did it. I left no room for the fact that if he wanted to spend 20 minutes emptying the dishwasher, why should I care? For now, Regina, we have to stop, which is heartbreaking. So I really do hope, and you've said it a bit online, I do hope you'll come back because this really is a fascinating topic. This has really triggered me on very many different levels. For today, let's give 3 tips, like you've just said. First of all, I would say get the book, right? Because if somebody's been clever enough to, research and already make some sense of this whole world for us, may as well, take advantage of that. But then to have that open discussion together with love and respect, 2 people in whose it's both best interest to run this family or just couple or household or whatever it is in a way that everybody's happy. What else did you say as well? The looking ahead, I thought was very clever, and also the fact that I suppose that also in your book, there's that idea you go and you help people who maybe do not have that, what did you call it? Executive functions.
Well, we all have executive functions, ADHD, depression, anxiety, and major life transitions, marriage, death, birth, divorce, cancer, COVID. All of those can tweak your executive function. So the third thing I would emphasize, Julie, is learn as much about your brain as you are able.
Yeah.
Help yourself understand why the management of all of this is so difficult and that you're not stupid or lazy.
Yes.
It's a brain thing.
Yes. Just like at work, if you're struggling with one specific task, if you're not managing to understand your Excel sheet, you're going to look up, how does it work? Or you're going to do a course or you're going to get a book. With our age, and I love that about the 50 plus, we should be at the stage where we do not feel ashamed of owning what we don't know, but that we know that we can get the resources, whether it's contacting somebody like you to help, getting a book, doing a course, asking friends for best practice, and also to understand that what we see of other people's lives is not.
Right.
They're famous for holding ourselves at a very high bar and thinking that everybody else is managing to be superwoman much better than us and look glamorous and go to the gym and get the 3 kids out of house on time and be a beautiful, sexy spouse or whatever, you know, and the house is spotless and any guest can turn around and have a 3-course meal. That's not very true. I mean, maybe we do that once every 6 months and post about it on Facebook, but that does not mean that that's how it is the whole time, right?
Well, and it is that way in some families. So again, when we compare ourselves to other people, we might as well just crawl into a hole because we'll never measure up.
Right.
It's about one's perception of oneself. Uplift and elevate your own self, kindly,
Right.
loving, gently. It's so layered. My first book is called Psychic Debris, Crowded Closets, the relationship between the stuff in your head and what's under your bed. I would also recommend that one because that helps you start looking at the mess of the clutter through the lens of the executive function, through the lens of managing your relationship with time.
This is fascinating. Regina, thank you very much for today.
Julie, this was really fun.
I would love to have you back. I can feel my brain is whizzing. It's a fascinating fact that we're even talking about this, you know?
Yeah.
Right?
All right.
So thank you for that. All the very best. The rest of you, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please leave me a review on podcast and see you this time next week. Bye. Bye, Regina. Take care and have a lovely day.
You too.
Bye.